Great. So my name is Ross Yelsey. I'm an Assistant Director of Admission and Marketing at Columbia Journalism School. I'd like to thank people for tuning in today to learn more about the Master of Arts program, Science Concentration, a terrific program for experienced journalists who want to get more training in all the different facets of science journalism, reporting, storytelling, all of that. I'd like to welcome two of our faculty members, the core faculty for the program, Marguerite Holloway and Jonathan Weiner, who will be talking with us a bit about the program, what you can expect to do in it, what kind of people are the best fits for the specific kind of program for experienced people, and a bit about the kind of training and skills you should come out of the program with. So I think we'll start with Marguerite and Jonathan, just to give an introduction to our audience, a bit about your own backgrounds and what drew you specifically to science journalism.
Do you want me to start, Jonathan?
Please do.
Okay. So I actually have a background in comparative literature. That's what I majored in, but I was always drawn to the sciences. I love the natural world, and I am very curious about sort of all fields of science, but I also really love writing. And I sort of discovered a little bit, well, not that late in life, but I discovered when I was at the journalism school, actually at Columbia, in the MS program many, many years ago, that you could bring these two things together. You could revel in exploring the natural world and science, but also do it in a way that really engaged writing and poetry and narrative. And so that's how I got into it. And after journalism school, I worked at Scientific American for many, many years. And then I came back to the journalism school to teach. And now when I write, it's mostly freelance. I'm working on a book about climate change. Yeah, I think that's it. Jonathan?
My story is very similar. It's I majored in English and American literature in college, but I had grown up in a very scientific atmosphere. My dad was a scientist, actually here at Columbia and then at Brown. And in college, I rebelled furiously against my father, and I thought that meant I had to hate science. So I tried very hard to become a poet. And it was only after I graduated and started trying to make a living as a freelance writer that I realized I could put the two together, as Marguerite says, and try to write with all the tools of literature, all the tools you can bring to it about scientific topics, about the environment and about medicine and about all of the sciences. So I freelanced for a while. I worked as an editor at a science magazine where I learned a lot. I ended up writing books for about 20 years and then came here 18 years ago to try to teach writing about science, nature, medicine, the environment, what we do together in this course. Yeah, very, very much parallel stories. And we try very hard to bring all of that to the course. It's not just nuts and bolts of writing about science, and you don't really need a strong science background. As Marguerite and I were just saying, we've learned a lot as we went along. You really need the interest, the enthusiasm, and the will to do it, but you don't need strong science backgrounds.
Great. And Marguerite, you mentioned you're a graduate of our MS program, and both of you teach in the MS program as well, which is a great program that has the fundamental reporting skills, storytelling skills, audiovisual skills, ethics, law, all of that kind of built into it for people who may not be too experienced already in journalism, but are kind of getting freshly kind of exposed to it and getting all those key professional skills. But when you are in the MA program, how do you approach teaching differently? And what do you enjoy about, creating the curriculum and working with the MA students? Which is different than the MS.
So yeah, well, I mean, I do love teaching in both of them, and sometimes there are often a lot of similarities, but there the big difference is really that the MA is sort of skipping over, like the MS, as you just said, Ross, is really trying to do some sort of basics. It presumes no background in journalism. And so it's really giving you the fundamentals of reporting, the fundamentals, as you said, of ethics and of putting together a story. The MA assumes that you have some background, so you're not spending as much time on that. And you are learning to deepen your reporting and deepen your writing, but you're doing it from a different place. You're starting at a different place. And because you're starting it from a different place, it allows the discussion to get sort of more granular in terms of those skills. And it really allows you to take different kinds of risks, because you know the basics. You're freer to experiment and to push your narrative, your narrative exploration, or to push your scientific curiosity, and I think that's a lot of what I really love about teaching in this program, that you're sort of going off and taking some very different kinds of risks that are really fun and that lead to a sense of sort of community and camaraderie and intensity that has a different flavor. I'm not saying the MS doesn't have that. It has all that too, but it just has a different kind of quality to it. I didn't know if I answered that well, but
Very well.
Jonathan?
No, and I think there are special challenges that that we can get into in the MA program, because people have already got some experience. They've got some sort of journalism 101 equivalent. For instance, narrative writing about science, the sciences, you can use the power of story to really pull readers into a subject that they might be afraid to enter, but they might think it's too hard, or they might think it's dry, or they might think it's too dense. And you can bring it alive for them through characters and scenes and dialogue, and make it something really special as a reading experience instead of sort of textbook-like. But how you do that takes practice. There's a lot of craft involved, and that's the sort of thing we can get into.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Jonathan, you mentioned earlier that people don't necessarily have to have a science knowledge base, really a significant one, to be able to, go into this program, but you are expecting people to have journalism experience. Could you help clarify, both of you, a bit about what you kind of expect students should already know to be, successful in this more advanced program?
Well, you need to know a bit about reporting, about interviewing, about note-taking, about the ethics of doing what we do. All of that, we assume you're bringing a lot of that to the class. We'll talk about those things, but we won't be talking about them at the very introductory level that we would in our MS classes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great. And maybe we can talk a bit about the structure of the seminar itself. So the MA Science students will be in a core seminar led by one of you in one semester, and then the other likely in the other one. But kind of how is it designed, and what are some of the subject matter, issues you'll be kind of diving into week by week in the seminar?
I can start with that. So the MA tracks are built around, science, politics, arts and culture, business. They're built around a core seminar, and the core seminar meets twice a week for 3 hours. And one of those sessions is usually just the class and the professor, me in the fall usually, and Jonathan in the spring. And the second class is a visitor, an expert in a different field, who is really coming in to sort of share knowledge about that field, but also trying to get at like patterns and themes that that allow you to think about science very broadly, so that we have a particle physicist coming in, for example, at the end of the first semester. We do not expect that anyone is going to get particle physics in a session, but there are certain things, certain patterns, and certain aspects of that field that can really shed light on reporting and understanding many other fields. So in the fall, we start with history of science, ecology, epidemiology, which then leads us into climate. We spend a fair amount on climate, amount of time on climate, and then we do AI and some physics. And again, the idea is really that you're developing ways of understanding the culture of science and the practice of science and the funding of science and instruments in science and what they make possible, and also what they limit, what they constrain. And those are sort of some of the ideas that you're really looking at that you can take, to apply to any field that you're in the sciences that you're reporting on. So that's sort of the fall semester seminar. And then Jonathan usually has the spring.
And in the spring, we dive more deeply into the life sciences. So there's some overlap with the fall, obviously. Ecology, you could say, is also one of the life sciences, but we're looking at evolution. We're looking at the mysteries of inheritance, all the way down to what is a gene and how does the discovery of the gene lead to all of these fantastically interesting and often disturbing ethical issues around gene therapy, gene editing, CRISPR, the rest of that, drug discovery, drug development. In the writing, we start with personal essays, which gives you a chance to really stretch as a writer, but personal essays exploring a theme in science or health or medicine, and then we do profiles of scientists or doctors, anyone on sort of anyone whose work touches on the subjects that we've been covering in the class. And again, as Marguerite said, we meet 2 days a week, 3 hours each time. So there's really a lot of time for us to dive deeply into great reading and great craft talk when it's just us, and then to dive deeper into the sciences when we bring in our guest speaker each week. So it amounts to a very rich program, and we enjoy that, and I think our students enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I want to add, we have, I mean, this, I don't know, Ross, if you want us to touch on this, but in the fall, the MA students join all the other MA students for a course called Evidence and Inference, and then for an investigative and data skills class. And what we've been seeing is that those classes are really dovetailing with the seminar, so that the things that people are learning in those classes, they're bringing into the seminar and into their work. And so it's been really amazing to see how this is all sort of weaving together. And that has really evolved over the program, and is a really wonderful development.
And Jonathan mentioned some of these guests that come into the seminar in both semesters to talk about different issues. Could you give us some examples of people who might be coming currently and also maybe in the past, and kind of the topics they've addressed with the class?
Sure. So right now, our professor is Gisela Winkler, who is a paleoclimatologist and who's also the climate scientist in residence at the journalism school this semester. She's leading the climate segment. We've had a wonderful science journalist and historian who Jonathan also has come in the spring, Angela Saini, who just talks about sort of institutions in science and a lot of very complicated, fraught science, and really, I think, helps the students sort of understand the cultural context of many of our scientific institutions. We have had a lichenologist. We've had an AI and ethics expert named Chad DeChant. We've had Merlin Sheldrake, because I'm really obsessed with mycology and well, mycology. He wrote Entangled Life. We mostly have people who are practicing researchers or scientists, and then occasionally also journalists like Angela Saini. I think bridges both those worlds. But we've had Darcy Frey come in, who's a wonderful writer, Elizabeth Rush come in. Yeah, anyway, it changes every year a little bit, but that's all I can remember at the moment. But that's the fall. Jonathan?
And I'm right now lining up guest speakers for the spring. But in the past, a wonderful dinosaur expert named Paul Olson, who's led us into the bowels of the Museum of Natural History to watch them putting together those gigantic skeletons. And Brian Greene, when I've been talking physics with the group, Brian Greene has come in sometimes to talk about his work. Siddhartha Mukherjee, those are two people who are distinguished as researchers and also as writers. And that's an exciting combination when we can manage that. Oliver Sacks, the wonderful neurologist and writer, used to be a regular guest in the in the last class. I would save him for last. At the last class of the year, often Oliver would come in, and he was just wonderful. Every question students asked, he answered with a story, and they were just always great stories. That was a wonderful lesson.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And so a big part of this experience that we haven't touched upon yet is the master's thesis, which is a really ambitious work of journalism that everyone in the MA program will do, but in the science one, of course, it will be a scientifically related master's thesis. Could you talk a bit about how you work with students and other advisors work with the students to kind of develop their master's thesis, and what that story could potentially be about, based, in terms of what subject matter and kind of the scope of what they can do with the mentorship here on that?
You want me to? Okay. So the thesis is a very ambitious project that spans both semesters. It's a piece at this point that's about 8,000 words long, a narrative feature. And sometimes people do a radio or audio component or do it in audio. And every now and then people do a doc version, but that requires that you're quite skilled in those areas, so you can do that. And basically, the idea is that you find something that you're very passionate about that can carry you for that whole series of months that you're working on it, and that you're really pushing what we keep talking about, your narrative writing and your ability to report for narrative. So you're trying to find a way of telling a story that is, as Jonathan was describing, like incredibly engaging, that can really pull people in, but that you're doing it in a way that is your own. There's really not a topic that somebody else has not written about or covered, but you're trying to find a way of doing that pushes it forward, that gives it much bigger scope, big ideas, and you're doing it as a way of exploring how to write using, again, Jonathan mentioned all this, but scenes and characters and arc and all of that. Because I think we really feel very strongly that not everybody is going to go on to write very long pieces and narrative pieces. Some people will, they love doing that and they can find their way doing it, but some people won't. And in fact, most people don't. But all of those skills, those incredible skills, apply at any scale of your writing. That beautiful reporting, the figuring out of a character, describing a scene, figuring out structure, all of that can inform a much shorter piece and can just give it that little bit of special quality that makes it into a gem of a story. And so that sort of it might seem like the thesis is maybe not always related, but it is, because it just gives you an incredible reporting experience and an incredible writing experience. I feel like I left something out important. Did
I
I?
would just add, yeah, that
I did.
it's also because you're spending months on one story, that's a great opportunity, and you're working pretty closely with your advisor. You might meet once a week with your advisor. Life as a journalist doesn't often give you that chance these days, and so you're going deep. And that in itself is really a great experience that can help you no matter what kind of journalism you end up doing in the future.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another aspect of the program that's great about the MA is you get this great training, these great experiences in the journalism school that we've talked about, the seminar, as well as these classes in the fall. Marguerite mentioned the MA Essentials and the Evidence and Inference class. But then you're taking 3 subject area classes in other schools around Columbia, taking advantage of all the great expertise and opportunities on campus. Could you speak a bit about some of the classes that students have gone into in the past and kind of what knowledge, they've been able to kind of apply from that as well?
Sure. But just I wanted to, because you asked us what some of the topics were that some of the theses were on, and I didn't address that. I would say that that, as I did say, finding something you're passionate about is really important, because you're going to be doing this for so many months. And people sometimes come in with an idea of what they want to do, but oftentimes people discover something in the seminar or in one of those outside classes that leads them to a story, idea, or topic. And they have done things on everything, like, ecology, restoration ecology, medicine, chemical contaminants, gun violence. Like, it's just a huge climate, cetaceans, alternative energy. Sorry, that's the dog. It's in the sorry, 1 second.
Sure.
Jonathan, would you like to pick up while I
Right.
And Jonathan,
Yeah. I have a dog too, so I understand. So right, other topics that that people have chosen for the thesis, they're always really fascinating. So one that comes to mind, a recent one, was a profile of the explorer who found Shackleton's lost ship, the Challenger, in Antarctica. That was by Adam Isco, who is writing frequently now for the New Yorker magazine. And Shayla Love wrote a fascinating thesis about the possibility that stress among your in the lives of your parents or your grandparents can be passed down to you through changes, epigenetic changes that affect the genome. That was beautiful work. And by the way, did you see this wonderful piece that she wrote in the New Yorker? I think it's just out in the New Yorker about dizziness. It's terrific. It's really good. So it just goes all over the place, and that's part of the fun of it. You choose something that you, as Marguerite says, that you are genuinely interested in, and you do a deep dive into it, and you come out with something really interesting.
great.
and oh, sorry, Ross,
Oh, I was just going to add, a nice thing about the MA program is you may have the potential, if you have a project that might, encompass some travel to parts of the US or abroad to different countries, depending on kind of the constraints of time and, what you're able to do here. A lot of our students are able to do that kind of ambitious reporting and go places they maybe have never been before to do this reportage.
Yeah. And
Right.
you had asked about, oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say about that there's a travel budget. You have to write a pitch for it. But many students who have a strong idea that will require travel get a travel grant through the school.
And Ross, we never answered your question about the outside electives, but people, as long as it's very, you have one outside course in the fall and 2 outside courses in the spring. And it's very broad, but it has to just, your choices can be very broad, but it has to relate to science, health, medicine in some way. But that can be courses in anthropology or in the narrative medicine program or in sociology, as well as climate change classes and a global forest class or a human evolution class. It's just, it has to have some connection, but they're very, very wide ranging. And those I just mentioned are, we have 2 students taking a psychology of trauma class this semester, one taking a human origins and evolution class, one taking sociology of science and technology, and one taking a global forests class. So that really gives you a sense of the range.
Mhm. Great. And in the journalism school, I should mention too, all of our grading is pass fail. There's not A, B, C, D letter grades here. So we don't have that kind of sense of people, getting feedback in that way, like a GPA. But maybe people are curious, if they come to a program like this, what kind of feedback, how are they kind of improving? What kind of feedback do you offer with edits and the kind of way that you work through drafts with them on their writing?
We both edit very closely. I know you do, Marguerite, and I do the same. Just often asking for a series of drafts and really getting down to it line by line sometimes to make it just as good as it can possibly be. That's another opportunity that you have by working closely with a mentor or professor, an editor, that is unfortunately getting more scarce out there. And you learn a lot by lifting your prose up by its bootstraps, draft by draft.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that is actually where most of the learning really happens. It's like really intensive editing. And as Jonathan said, sometimes you're rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. And sometimes, the comments you get on your stories are longer than your actual stories. And that, because it really is, there's so much to think about and examine in your own work. And it is a really exciting intellectual engagement around the editing. So that is very intense. And we meet often, and there's a lot of office hours, and we meet often to talk about not just the theses, but also to talk about people's trajectory over the course of the semester, over the course of the year. We always check in to hear what people want to learn about, like with their own work, like what they really want to get out of the year, and then really try to focus in on that. So yeah, that is really fun part of it.
Great. And you were talking a bit about a couple of students, Jonathan, from the past and kind of some of the work they've been doing in different publications. Can we talk a little bit about what some of the career paths have been over the years of our MA Science grads?
Yeah, they really go all over the place. I just caught up in office hours a couple days ago with Nidhi Sharma from 2 years ago, who's writing for NBC News. And yesterday with Muriel Alarcon, who is freelancing for top-level publications in South America, including in Chile, where she's based, and teaching there, teaching journalism, teaching some of the same sorts of things that she worked on here in this class. I mentioned Adam Isco before, who's doing all these Talk of the Towns for the New Yorker. I'm very proud of Adam. And Marguerite, do you want to mention a few too?
Yeah, I mean, there's a student from a couple of years ago who is working a lot for Freakonomics Radio. She was in radio beforehand, but she started a new podcast with producers and others there. Maybe she is the producer. Anyway, we have a lot of people who went to Popular Science a few years ago. So I think we actually have like 3 or 4 people who might be there at the moment. We've had people who have been at Scientific American for a time and who have moved on to other things. I mean, it really is a very, very wide range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
it's
so,
oh, sorry, go Jonathan.
go ahead, Russ.
I was just saying I manage the MA Twitter handle. So for people interested in the kind of what alums are doing, it covers all the 4 concentrations, including science. But I do spend a lot of time, tweeting out a lot of great stories by the MA science alums from all the different years, including I think
Yeah.
Dominique Mossbergen from a couple of years ago is at the Wall Street Journal reporting on like all sorts of issues related to vaccines and health and all sorts of topics. And, Dino Grandoni at the Washington Post doing a great climate and other type of work there. So there's a lot of people I constantly see putting out, top level stuff. Hard to keep up with them, really.
Yeah, it's great that you do though, Ross. It's amazing how you keep track of everything. We appreciate that.
It's a good problem to have, to keep track of all the great stuff. You can't catch it all, but so much stuff. Great. And so going back, so people who might be viewing this later and are kind of interested in this program, they've heard a lot of, amazing things about what they might be able to do here. They might be wondering now, like, what do you look for in a strong application to this program? When you are kind of reading applications each cycle, what stands out to you as somebody who might be a good fit for this particular experience?
Do you want to start, Jonathan?
Sure. I mean, I think the core thing I look for is genuine enthusiasm, genuine interest, people who really are compelled to explore something in psychology or in medicine or public health or whatever it is. They're drawn to this. They write with that genuine enthusiasm about what it is. I just mentioned Muriel Alarcon because we had coffee yesterday. I still remember her application. Her mom is a doctor in Santiago who also works, does a lot of work in rural areas in Chile, helping poor people in poor villages, indigenous people. And Muriel just wrote about her mother's work and how much it inspires her in her application and how she wants to do something. She wants to offer the world something like what her mother does, but in journalism. I forget how she put it now, but it was inspiring to read. So that sense of excitement, that's the main thing I look for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would agree, and maybe just add that they're definitely, even though sometimes the program does take people who are not as experienced as sort of the average MA, and it is because they've shown that quality, that there is some incredible sort of passion and pull towards these fields. And there's a kind of intellectual curiosity and desire to really challenge yourself and push yourself and grow with your writing and your thinking that I think really is a hallmark of the students that end up in the program. And sometimes that has nothing to do with experience, although mostly sometimes it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've mentioned this a couple times glancingly, but because the people in the program do come here with that common sense, that shared sense of excitement, they learn a lot from each other. They really tend to bond, and we're very proud of the way the MA Science group in particular tends to be pretty tight over the years. Very, very often they're a close group and they just learn a lot from each other besides what they're learning in the seminar room.
Mm-hmm. Great. And a question, I know, Jonathan, you mentioned a student from the past who's from Chile. How kind of international is the student body often in this program? Is it hospitable for people from a lot of different kind of backgrounds in terms of how they might do journalism in other places around the world? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very international program. Very often, half the class or more, I would say, comes from countries other than the United States. And that's part of the excitement.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I think that is it for the questions I see that are applicable for the MA Science program today. So I'd like to welcome any other questions in the future. You can always write to us at apply.journalism@columbia.edu. And also just know if you're thinking about the MA program that you might want to apply for this coming cycle. The application deadline is January 5th. So you have quite a bit of time if you're watching this in the next few days to put together an application. We're always happy to have conversations in the admissions office about the application process and other things about, figuring out what the right fit for you might be when it comes to our programs. And if you have more questions about this particular program, you can reach out to us at the apply.journalism@columbia.edu address, and we can handle that there. And we'll have plenty more webinars about the admission cycle process and frequently asked questions coming up too. So we'd love to see you there. All right. Well, thank you, Jonathan and Marguerite. It's been a great conversation, and we look forward to seeing you at upcoming events. Marguerite, did you have some?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, it's wonderful if people reach out to us too, because we love to talk about their backgrounds and sort of talk through what we're looking for and what they're looking for. And so, please, our email addresses are on the website. So please reach out to us as well, if you would like to.
All right. Thank you again. Have a great rest of your day. And we look forward to seeing all of you at upcoming events in the near future. Bye now.
Okay. Bye.